Well, good day everybody and welcome back to Survival NS. Well, as you can see, we've got another glorious maritime day. However, it's not going to last long. We're expecting a weather system to move in and dump a pile of snow on us. So I'm not exactly sure how far into this video I'm going to get today, but in true maritime fashion, we're going to plow ahead. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to relay some techniques, some tips, some tricks on how you can keep your hands from getting cold and from freezing. You're not going to want to miss this episode, so stick around. Now, as you know, many countries around the world experience all four seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall. And when it comes to winter, a lot of us like to head outdoors and enjoy our favorite winter activity. However, I think probably the biggest issue in the winter when you're trying to enjoy your favorite activity is keeping your hands and your fingers warm. And that is an issue that many of us struggle with. Now, the reason why our hands and fingers are usually the first parts of our body to experience cold effects of winter is because they're the furthest parts of your body from the core. And as such, the warm blood that's being pumped out from your heart to circulate through your body to get to your hands and fingers takes a while. And by the time it usually reaches your hands and fingers, it's not usually as warm as it is when it starts out, because it takes quite a bit of time to get there. And the other problem is your fingers have no muscles, and they have very small blood vessels in them. And when your fingers get cold, those blood vessels constrict, which means blood flow to those vessels is very difficult, if at times almost impossible. So for that reason, you're going to have to employ a few basic techniques to keep your hands and your fingers from freezing. And what most people often think about is they're going to purchase the most expensive and warmest pair of gloves or mittens on the market, and they think that's going to be enough to keep them from freezing. I'm sorry to say that is not the case. And I can tell you from experience, from my early days in the military when we were deployed on Arctic winter expeditions, that we were usually issued really warm winter gear, including Arctic mitts. Now, these things were really, really warm. However, when we were stationary, our fingers inside these mitts would often still get cold. And that's because you're not moving, you're not working them. So one of the basic strategies that you can employ when you feel that your hands and fingers are starting to get cold is to move. Do some jumping jacks, some push-ups, or go for a hike. Get those large muscle groups working, because once you do that, your body starts to generate heat and your heart starts pumping out warm blood much faster at a quicker rate to the rest of your body. Now, where people start to get into difficulty is when they allow the body core temperature to drop. Once that happens, your body goes into survival mode and quite often starts restricting blood circulation to the extremities, your hands, your fingers, your toes, and your feet. And it does that to preserve the vital organs of your body to keep you alive. And once your body core temperature starts to drop and hypothermia starts to set in, you have to act quickly. Now, a lot of people would just simply jump into a sleeping bag. Now, I know I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but I do want to make this point because this is very important and not a lot of people know this information. If you're cold and you have the onset of hypothermia and you think that you're just going to jump into a sleeping bag and that sleeping bag is going to warm you up, you're in for a rude awakening. You see, the purpose of the sleeping bag is not to warm you up. You warm up the sleeping bag. You see, your sleeping bag will retain your body heat so that you stay warm with the body heat. If you have no body heat for the sleeping bag to retain, the sleeping bag isn't going to do what it's designed to do. So a technique that a lot of us in the survival world use is we jump into a sleeping bag skin to skin with a buddy of ours. And that really helps for you to get warm, especially if you have a buddy that isn't as cold as you are and is relatively warm. Now, some folks may be a little bit skittish about jumping into a sleeping bag with a buddy of theirs and take all kinds of ribbing from their friends on social media. Well, just tell your buddies that you were on an episode from Naked and Afraid. That should pretty well cover it. Well, I'm going to have to cut this video short because I can see out in the distance now that that weather system is now moving in. So I'm going to cut it off here and we'll take it up again tomorrow where we left off today. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you some strategy and some tips on how to keep your hands relatively warm when you're out enjoying the wilderness and the temperatures drop. So what we're going to do is I'm going to head inside, set up, and by the time you get back, we'll be set to go. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you. See you in a bit. Okay, so as you can see in front of me here, I have a few pieces of gear which I'll get to in a second. However, the first thing I want to do and get out of the way is the electronic or the battery heated clothing out there. You know, in this age of technological advances, we've now got ourselves involved in battery operated socks, gloves, hats, and clothing. Now, I don't have any of those pieces of gear here for a very important reason. Not that I haven't used, bought, or tried any of these, because I have. But here's what I found out. These battery-operated pieces of clothing aren't worth the weight in gold at all. Oftentimes they will fail. They just break down. The batteries don't function well in winter conditions. And I've had several pairs of gloves and socks and in fact insoles as well that are battery operated, and they've all failed because they're made cheaply. And the one thing you should really be aware of, if you're going to take these pieces of kit out into the wilderness and expect them to keep you nice and toasty, you're sorely mistaken. They're not really going to function well. Now, I'm not saying you can't find a decent piece of clothing that is battery operated that will keep you warm, because you can. However, you're going to have to pay a very hefty price for a pair of gloves, pair of socks, insoles, and even jackets that are battery operated. I mean, I'll just give you a quick example. A battery operated, a high-tech one, for a piece of a jacket will run you close to $500. That's a little outrageous in my books. So I don't take any of that out into the backcountry because most of these pieces of gear are poorly made with second-grade materials. So if your battery breaks down, now you're left with a crappy piece of gear that is not designed to keep you warm in cold weather conditions. That's why I don't use them, and I stick to the traditional warm clothing that I look for cold weather environments. The next piece of gear I want to talk about is these inserts. Now these are the chemical inserts. Basically everybody knows what they are. You rip them open. They look like this. And you stick them in your boots or in your gloves. But what I find all too often is how people utilize these things. I'll give you a quick example here. So they rip open the package, they take the insert, and they place it in the palm of their hand in their mitt or their glove. And that is totally unacceptable. This is not going to do anything for you. And the reason for that is because the palm of your hand already has muscles there. So when you're walking, you're working, the muscles are generating heat from the blood flow. It's the fingers that are the problem. And most of your blood vessels are on the back of your hand. So that's why today you'll see gloves and mitts that are being sold with little pockets on the back, little zippered pockets that you can open up, and you place the heater inside, because that's where it's supposed to go, because most of your blood vessels are right here, and you need to warm the blood by the time it gets to your extremity to keep your fingers from freezing. So these things do not go in the palms of your hands. They go in the back of your hands to heat up the blood vessels. So the next piece of gear is a pair of fleece gloves. Now these things are fairly warm if the temperatures aren't too cold, but in extreme cold temperatures, these things aren't going to function very well. I mean, these are not windbreaker type of gloves. They're just nice, soft fleece gloves, and in mild winter conditions, these are going to do you just fine. The only thing I wouldn't use these for is if you're going to handle tools, especially sharp tools like knives and axes, because these things, there's no grip to them. Now, in order to prevent tools from sliding off your gloves, you're going to need a pair of what we call in the military contact gloves. That's what these are. Now I'm just going to show you, get close to the camera here so that you can see. In the palm of my hand here, you're going to see these little silicone nubs. And that's there so that you can utilize tools like axes and saws and knives, and it won't slip out of your hands. And a strategy that I like to employ is if I'm wearing a pair of mitts or a pair of gloves, I wear these inside those gloves or mitts. So then I can just rip off the gloves or the mitts, and I can utilize my hand tools without the worry of sliding off my hands and hurting myself or somebody nearby. So as most of my friends know, I live in the northeastern part of Canada. And we get winter here, trust me. We get a variable amount of snow, rain, freezing rain. We get it all here. And because of that, gloves and mitts that I purchase are not for just extreme cold weather, like dry cold, but you have to prepare for wet cold, because that is the worst kind of cold. Because the minute you get wet, that wet is going to draw the heat away from your body 30 times faster than the ambient air temperature alone. So for that reason, you're going to need to purchase yourself a nice pair of warm gloves or mitts that are made of waterproof material like Gore-Tex, which is what these are. And now these have a nice durable leather palm, so that if I had to utilize axes and saws and other sharp instruments, I wouldn't have any problem with them sliding off. So if you're living in a wet environment in the winter, you're going to need a pair of waterproof gloves or mitts. Now, if you are a winter enthusiast and you venture off into the backcountry often, and you're out there harvesting wood, setting up shelters, collecting wood, whatever you're going to be doing. If you're working out there, you're going to need a good pair of insulated work gloves, such as these. Okay? Now these are specifically designed for ruggedness, durability, and reliability. An outer shell which is waterproof as well, with a drawstring. And the reason for the drawstring is so that if you have a pair of liners under your gloves and these are too bulky for you to do any work out there, then you just simply rip these off. You're not going to lose them, and now you still have your liners that you can utilize to get the work done. And once your hands start getting a little cold, you can just simply put these back on because they're right there next to you. These here are down mitts. Now, I've had these down mitts now for about 40 years, and I used these on my expedition climb to Denali, which at the time was named Mount McKinley, the highest peak in North America, in Alaska. And these are white goose down mitts, and they're produced by the North Face. Now, don't get me wrong here. I don't expect everybody to run out and get a pair of these, because these are very expensive. At the time of purchase at that time, I paid about $150 for these. That was harsh. Now today, if you were to find these and purchase them, they would cost you in the vicinity of about $400 to $500. Again, I don't expect you to run out, but let me just give you a few tips on these things. These things are actually really going to keep your hands warm. Down mitts, just like your down sleeping bag. It's got a durable palm, which you can utilize. It's got a little grippy substance. It's not really waterproof, but again, you don't need it to be when you're in cold, dry environments. What you're concerned about is to ensure that your hands stay warm. And these will do that. Battery operated hand warmer, which looks like that. Comes in a little box like that. I got this one off of Amazon, and I believe I paid at the time about $35, $40 for one of these. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to actually see if these things actually work. So here's what I found. Now these things look pretty neat. Comes with a little USB powered. Just plug it in on the front there. And it has an indicator light on the side right there to tell you when it's fully functional. Then on the top here, you have 3 levels of heat that you can punch in. The claim is by the company that these things will get up to about 95 degrees. I don't know if that's true. I've only used this a few times, and I can tell you that it does get fairly warm, but it doesn't last that long. And look at this thing. Would you put that inside a mitt or a glove? I mean, look how bulky that is. That will not work in a glove or a mitt. Now, I can see an application for this if you're out and about in the city, window shopping, or you're going to, say, a sports event outdoors, and you place this inside your pockets. And your hands get cold, and then you can place your hands in your pockets, and your hands will get reheated. That is pretty much all these are really good for. The other application that I might find useful is if you're in your sleeping bag and you find yourself cold in there, place a couple of these down by your feet or in your core. And I can see the purpose of that, reheating your core or your feet. So, yeah, I would probably try that out. But walking around, having these in your gloves, totally useless. Now the next piece of kit, everybody knows what these are. These are like surgical gloves. Now, these are very important to be wearing should you be out in a cold environment. And the reason for that is because if you're out there working, chopping wood, harvesting wood, putting up shelters and stuff, your hands are going to sweat inside your gloves. And what you don't want is you don't want that sweat to transfer into the material of your gloves. So wear yourself a pair of these surgical gloves inside your gloves or your mitts, and it will prevent the sweat from entering the material of your gloves. It'll keep the sweat in close to your palm and the heat as well. These things act like a vapor barrier. Think of like, say, inside your jacket, you put on a little windbreaker. Now, the windbreaker is designed to keep the heat in and the cold out, right? So the wind can't get in, and the body heat is retained within that windbreaker. That's basically what these gloves are doing. So I always have a pair of these when I head into the backcountry. And the last piece of kit I'm going to talk about are these right here. Now, for most people out there in the military circles are going to recognize these immediately. These are what we call Arctic mitts. And back in the day, people used to call these idiot mitts. Not because we were idiots for wearing them. It's because when you're wearing these, you really can't do very much with these on. I mean, you have zero dexterity with these on. However, if you're looking for a pair of mitts that are going to really do the job to keep your hands warm, guaranteed, these are the mitts you're going to want to purchase. These come with an outer shell and a flannel inner shell. And they're connected with snaps. Just like that. But when it comes to warmth, these are unbeatable. And if you're going to wear a pair of liners inside these, just make sure you purchase these about a size larger than usual. Again, you have your little drawstring there which you can put through your hand so that if you need to use your liners, you just rip these off and you still have them connected to you. It also comes with a little furry back right here. And no, this is not to rub the snot off your face. This is so that when your face starts to get cold and you see signs of frostbite, you put these, the back of these, on that area to warm your face up. That's what these are designed for. Now, these things you can find at just about any military surplus store out there. And they're fairly cheap today. I mean, you could purchase these at that outlet for about 35 to 40 bucks. If you were to buy these new on an outlet store online, they would run you over 100 bucks. So if you're looking for a pair of extreme cold weather mitts, these are the ones you're going to want. So as you can see, a lot of these strategies that I've just talked about are easy to employ, and it will assist in keeping your hands warm. My next video I'll try to get out is how to keep your feet warm, because your feet are even more important than your hands. See, when your hands get cold, you can easily take your hands, place them inside your jacket, underneath your armpit to quickly warm them up. But your feet in your boot, where are you going to put your foot if you take it out of your boot? I mean, unless you got a fire going, then you can stick your feet near the fire to warm them up. They're not going to get warm. So, there are different strategies to keep your feet warm as opposed to your hands. And that will hopefully be my next topic. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, smash that subscribe button. All right, take care, enjoy yourself out there, and have yourself a wonderful day.